Buddy, welcome to the Rybickulous Faith Podcast. It's so good to have you. Can you open us up in prayer, please?
Father God, we come together this morning at a special time to glorify the great I am, to glorify God and to pray for those that are out there that are hearing this, that there's encouragement and that God is doing everything in bless Sarah. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Now, Buddy, can you introduce yourself and share a little about who you are today?
Yeah, my name is Buddy Mercer, and I'm 82 years old. Married for 52 years to my beautiful wife, Jane, and we have three wonderful kids. One of them is a nurse supervisor at a hospital in South Bay here in Torrance, California. Baby girl is a math teacher in San Diego County, and she's also got her doctorate in administration. Our son is in a little town outside of Fort Worth, Texas, buying a home there on the Colorado line with a huge garage for all his stuff. And we got five grandchildren and four great grandchildren. And Jane and I are retired, and we are having a good time with this book and all the things that's gone along. And you never ever dreamed that it was going to be like this.
Wonderful. Now, your book title is The Great I Am is the Golden Strand. I found that to be powerful and poetic. What does that title mean, and how did it come to you?
That title is going to take a minute because we have been, my wife and I have fun meeting every night when we go to bed. And the day was over, and we thank God for a beautiful day, and we're still here. And it was during a horrible time. The financial situation through one of our making. We got mixed up in Hollywood, and there were things that were going on, and we just had a financial disaster. So when we went to prayer that night after our CPO gave us the news, it was great, and we were hopeful and we trust God. And at the end of our prayer, then all of a sudden, my wife is speaking in tongues. She has the gift of tongues and interpretation. And I'm thinking, this is not, God don't make house calls. I was and then the interpretation came, and it was, now children, I am here. I love you. I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Trust me. Do not doubt my word and have no fear. And I'm like, Jenny, that was cool, but God didn't make house calls, and what were you doing? And she said, Buddy, that's God. And a few minutes later, the interpretation came shortly, and he said, my son, I love you. Well, that got my attention right there. And he told us that he was the great I am. Well, God walked along, and he started making a way, and the pathway that had looked crooked and devastating, he started making a way that was incredible. We had our problems, but he gave us some encouragement. At the time, he spoke to our pastor, and he told our pastor to tell us that what was going on was not our fault, that we had been abused and deceived, and that he would take care of us. And that gave us great comfort, and we decided just to move on. And for the next year and a half or so, we heard this voice every night, and it was always about the same thing. And at the end was, and the great I am, and I love you. Well, I went to theologians and pastors because the great I am words are not in the Bible. I am that I am, yes, and Jesus said that I am, and I'm like, I keep getting this, and the pastors and the theologians all agree that if God said that He is the great I am, then He is the great I am. And so I've heard other pastors, I've heard the great I am in more things here lately. And so then was my wife and another friend of ours had been encouraging me to write the book. And I thought, nobody wants to know about Buddy Mercer, but they kept encouraging me. So I decided to do it in February of last year. God said He wanted the book written. So you got to argue with your wife and with God. You do what you're told to do. And I started writing, and it was amazing because, well, I didn't know how to make a manuscript. I'm not an author. I have never done this before. And I started writing, and it seemed like that everything that I put in was already there. And it was just my life, starting from the time that I was born and went through all of my life. And it was like he put the words in my head and I put the words on paper. And it just kept going. And one day I had a vision, a dream, or whatever, or maybe I just taking it up, but it was completely dark in my mind. And I saw I thought a light roll down in the distance, and it started coming at me. And as it came toward me, it got bigger, but it was casting no light. And when it got to me, and so when it passed me, it was a golden strand, or I thought it was a golden thread. But my wife said, Buddy, that's a golden strand. For a while is tough. And it instantly came that that was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And it would sound like a knock, but this is the way it came. And he let us know that night. He said, I am the great I am, and I am the golden strand. And that's how the title came. Between him and my wife, we got it titled, and it has gone ever since then.
Love it. So God gave you the title.
I can take no credit for any of this. God has given all of it to us.
Yes, He is a good God.
Yes.
Now, take us back. What did life look like during a season when you felt lost, discouraged, or uncertain about your purpose?
Sarah, my whole life. Well, it started off that way. The first times, if you read the first three chapters of my book, it was a dark time there because I decided that I wasn't going to go to college, and I had music scholarships, and everything was going my way. Had a different whole idea about my life. I was going to go be a rodeo cowboy and blow riding and bear dog. And it was just a lively time. And I got into a little altercation and in a place in Texas, and unfortunately, police officer came in about that time, and he got his jaw in the way of what I was swinging, and he got a broken jaw, and they hauled me in, and it was a time that it looked like I was going to be going to prison for assault on the police officer, assaulting with a deadly weapon. All it was a key stick that I'd broken, but the judge was dead set that I had hurt one of his officers, and in Texas, you don't do that. And he told me that I'll be going to prison. And the courtroom got quiet, and all of a sudden, a lady said, Your Honor, may I speak? And I turned around and looked, and it was the wife of the police officer with the broken jaw. And he said, Yes, ma'am. And she said, Your Honor, with questions, God has told us that Buddy is a victim of circumstances, and we come before you to plead the mercy of God and brought the charges against the police officer.
Wow.
And the judge said, I don't know about this. And he said, clear the courtroom. And I'm like, here it comes. And they took me across the hall, got me out of there, and a little bit later they called me back, and the court was empty. The only people in there was the judge, the bailiff, and a couple of deputies. And he walked up into my face and told me, boy, I would give anything to send you to Huntsville. But I cannot go against what this woman has said and has done. The charges are going to be dropped. Will not be on your record. You've been at the mercy of God. And I was kept for a couple of days on other charges, but they turned it loose. And he said, You leave my town and don't you ever come back. And I'm like, well, you ain't going to see me here again. And they put me out on the road 5 miles off. And the deputy got me out of the car, took the handcuffs off, and he came around with his blow club and popped me on the shins a couple of times. Got in the car and took off, and here I am standing in a cold morning with nothing on, hardly just a jacket. Strangely enough, at the time I thought there was a pickup that came out driving, and the guy got a little ways past me. Just the voice came back, just barked out, opened the door, said, "Get in." He said, "The Holy Spirit told me to pick you up." And he said, "I'm taking you home with me, and I don't know what's going on." He took me home with him. I met his wife, and they got me a job, and I worked up in 6 months, got my life started again. I wasn't real smart. I left then and went to work in the oil field doing dangerous work with dangerous men and partying and all that stuff. But I went through that, and I finally got on. But so to go on with this, my family thought I was dead. I'd been doing work in the oil fields in the Gulf of Mexico, and the rumor went to my mom that the rig went down. My body went with it, and I never found my body. So my mother thought that I was dead. And that was brought to me by a man who knew my parents. I was headed for no trouble and wound up homeless on the streets of LA. And that was the darkest time because I had no money, no identification, no clothes, no nothing. And I was there for quite a while, and I'd lost about 40 pounds. And I thought that I was going to be dead. Uh, One night, in our room, I saw three doors in a room that I was in. And I went to the first door, and it was opened up, and it was horrible. It was my life, and what was going on in my life, and demonic, and just people screaming over were going to hell. I didn't like that, so I opened up the next door, and sir, I had a complete picture of Folsom Prison. And my thought was, okay, I've never been there, but that don't look bad to me. I'm off the streets. But the next door that I opened, I looked in, and it was my mother, my grandma, and my grandpa that I loved dearly. And they were crying out to God for me in prayer. And the last thing I remember was hearing, "God have mercy." And I don't know what happened when I woke up. And sleeping up under the freeway, you knew when it was early morning because the trucks were rumbling quickly. And I thought, it's breakfast time. I had no clothes, clean clothes. I was in rags. I had plastic wrapped on my feet for shoes. And I went to the milk and I got me some toast, some oats, and some coffee. And I had breakfast, and I thought, okay, this is. I had no idea, sir, where I was going or what I was doing. I just knew in my heart that I was getting off the street that day. On the way out, a young woman said, "Hey, cowboy, you better get cleaned up for your trip." And I'm like, okay, cool. And he said, "Come with me." He took me down to a room, and he had three dogs. He had a pair of work boots that were used, but they were my size. He had work clothes that were used, and they were my size, and they were on socks. And a booty bag with children floating out and everything. And then the most important bag was one that was filled with candy, canned meat, and crackers. And he said, "I'm going to leave you alone, go get a shower, get cleaned up." And it was the first shower that I had in a year. And I enjoyed that shower, and I got out, I shaved, and I took scissors and gave myself a haircut. And it wasn't too fancy, but it looked decent. And so when I looked in the mirror, I made a statement I didn't realize, and I said, "Buddy Mercer, you are a brand new man." And so I went and put on my clothes, and I went looking for this guy. As I went down the hall, there was a guy that worked in the motion, came back, and he rolled, "Well, what are you doing back here? You're not allowed back here." And all of a sudden, he's on the kick at me. And I'm thinking, I can do this. I said, "But there was a man." And I described him. He said, "There's nobody here by God walking through. I don't know who you saw, but it's not here. Now get off." And I did not argue with him. I left. And I walked 72 blocks from 7th and San Pedro in LA to Florence and Avalon, which got out in notoriety later on before the Rodney King riots started. And we walked into what a employment office. It was a state employment office. So I walked in there and I didn't know what was going on, but there was a beautiful African American lady about 60 years old, and she said, "Hey, cowboy, you want a job?" And I walked out, and she said, "Hand me a piece of paper." And I walked 12 blocks more with my bags, went to this place called Bonded Engine, a lot out back, a big building, and I walked up in it, and not under no none, we got on black spots, and I walked short sleeved. And he, "What do you want?" And I said, "Sir, I guess I'm the janitor." And that man shook a little bit. He turned and grabbed the paper out of my hand, and he called his Hollywood-looking son. "He come get this boy a mop and a bucket and put him to work." That was about 11 o'clock in the morning. About 1 o'clock, they came back for, I was already working, having a good time. Morgan Hollywood looking dude came back and said, "Come with me, the old man wants to see you in his office." And so I'm thinking, this is it. I went back to or followed Morgan, went to his office. And when I walked in, it was a big office, and there were four guys in suits. Those days, suits meant probably police officers or detectives, and they locked the door behind me when I walked in. The old man was sitting at his fancy desk, and I sat and looked at that, and nothing was said. And I finally said, "Hey, say something, you're scaring me to death." And he said, "Buddy, you're scaring the hell out of me, so talk to me." I said, What do you want?" He said, "Well, number one, I thought it was janitor about 45 minutes before you walked in." He said, "Number two, I did not put an order in for a janitor." He said, "Number three, what scared me is there was nobody there at that office by this name." And I'm like, "You got the paper?" He said, "That scares me half to death. I don't understand it." And they put me to work, and from there on, the story is written. I got off the streets. That day, God got me off the streets. And I know, now that I look back, I was usually in London. At that time, I had no clue what I was doing, and I had decided that God didn't have anything for me. But at that time, after I looked back, I know that there was angels. Nobody can deny that.
Yeah.
That means that I'm not. And then my wife lady offered me that this whole thing because I got off the streets that day. I had a job that night, and I slept that night in another building. And that week, the old man that was so mean gave me $100, told me to go get a motel. He said, "Nobody looking for me. It was them sleeping in the streets." And when I got there to the motel or hotel, the guy said, "Oh, you must be that Mexican that Lou sent down here." And I'm like, "Yes, well, I'm good room." And he said, "The room's paid for from you." And for the first time,
Wow.
so I slept that man behind a locked door between clean sheets, and I cried myself to sleep. That's my story, and I'm sticking to that part because that was the beginning of a beautiful life.
Oh, yes. I mean, that is a beautiful testimony. Now, you describe your story as one of grace, grit, and never giving up. Can you share another moment where all three of those showed up in your life?
Well, we can go from right there, and I can share one of the. And I found out that my mother thought that I was dead. I got married to my beautiful wife, and after got out, she got a couple of little girls, and my life started really going good, but I missed my mama. And I told my wife my whole story, and she said, "Well, we're going to meet your mother in Texas," and we started thinking about that and praying about it. And we made a decision in 1976. We got a son, and we bought a house. Everything was just going our way. And so I talked to my wife, and we decided we was going to go see my mother. And everything was going well, but one day I came home, and my wife was crying, and she's not a crier. And I'm like, "What's it now?" And she said, "Buddy, I just got a call from my sister in Texas, and they tell me that your mother has passed away from a heart attack," and she passed away. And I thought, okay, that's nothing I can do about that. Then let's just go ahead and start my life. And we went ahead and we did that. Took on just God just led us all the way through. And I did that job from janitor. I went on to become sales manager, opened that place. I had so many, but you never give up. Those guys, one day I was done good as a sales manager. The customer service at the company stunk, and we were going bankrupt at the company. And the owner and the boom counter, the accountant, excuse me, the boom counter, because he wasn't much of a man, but he called me and said, Buddy would like for you to take over as general manager. And I thought, yeah, buddy, the business is doing boom. You want me to go down and look at the Titanic, hit the iceberg, and I'm not even no way. Oh, I'm running out of gold, and I drove out to where we lived and the coach that we got me in. And I went to see the pastor, and I was in one mood when the receptionist has said, the pastor's here, but he's on the phone. I said, not anymore. I need to see him. I'm not walking in. And the pastor was a character, and he said, I'll talk him on the phone. He said, I got to go, so I think I better hang up. And he said, so how can I help you? And I told him what had happened. And he said, I don't know what's going on, but we can pray. And he prayed right there. And my Sunday night, he told me, buddy, God told me that you're going to take that job for a season. It won't be all your life, but it's going to be for a season, and He's got something better for you. So I went in Monday morning, and this is plain truth. When I got there, they looked at me and said, after you show up after you want out of here. And I'm like, okay, if you want me to be general manager or not? And they said, well, we asked you. And here's where I did not know what I was saying. I said, I've got 7 things that I have for you that are not mutable. It's either yes or no. And I said, and first of all, you're going to have to leave the company. You're the owner and you're the big problem. And you're going to have to leave the company for 120 days. I turned to the accountant and I said, I want an outside accountant because I don't trust your numbers. Number three, I'm firing the plant manager that you have today because he's very ethical racist, and I'm not going to put up with that. And I really don't remember the next two, but there was no talk about me getting more money. But the owner did not like the idea that I was sending him home. But I told him that either you guys do what I want. Well, we'll talk about it. And I'm like, nope, it's either you do it, I'm going home. And so he left about 2 o'clock that afternoon. His wife called me and said, how dare you tell the boss that he's got to come home? And I said, well, man, let me explain something to you. I did not know this, sir, but he had a personal guarantee on his house on the company. And if that company went bankrupt, she lost her fancy home down in Palos Verdes. And I told her that. And I said, so you better talk to your husband because you may be sleeping in a tent. Well, I took that over and we went through it. And we thought it was a horrible fight. And one day the bank somehow their company had gotten into them for $1 million on 1.5 million a year in sales. Well, I'm no booty on it, but I know that's not good management. And the big guy from the bank came to us and wanted to know what was going on. And I told him that I was going to clean that company up and we were going to pay them back. And he said, do you have a plan for that? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, can I get a copy of it? I said, no, sir, that's in my head. And I said, how do you take it or leave it? And he said, I'm going to go back and tell my peers that I'm giving you an opportunity to do this on your road. I said, you take it or leave it. I mean, if we go bankrupt, you don't get anything, but you give us a chance and you're going to get money back. 90 days later, I went to Mitchell Manufacturers and I went in there and he laughed because everybody had suits on and I had my boots and my block, my Levi's, and a smart button shirt. They took one look at me and he said, this is a representative. Well, we made a deal out there. They gave us an opportunity to come out of bankruptcy. Shortly thereafter, we were doing business with pit bulls, and I got a call from the big kahuna in Philadelphia named John Foster. And he called me and he said, Buddy, I need some engines. And we built engines and we were building engines for him. I said, well, that's what we do. That's what we're doing for you now, John. He said, no, the CEO of Portville just came to me and said he wants to put engines in all of our warehouses and all of the stores in the west half of the United States. And I need 1,000 engines. Can you do that? I need them by the 1st of January. This was September. So I called the plant manager who that I had hired, and he was a black fellow who was an ex-cook gang member. He lost straight enough by the time God after we got done. He sees Jesus as his Savior, and we were all on the Christian shop there. I called James up and said, James, this is what we got. Can we do it? And he said, Mr. B, do you believe me? And I'm like, yeah. He said, do you have faith in God? I'm like, yeah. He said, what are you calling me for? We can do it. So I called John Foster Buck and I told him what. And so things happen so much, I can't go into them all because it's forever. But we had 1,000 engines distributed to the warehouses, to the stores before the 1st of January. And that money came in and it took us out that we paid our vendors and everything was going well. In 76 or 78, we went to the Northwest. I'd lived up there before, and my wife was all struck by the beauty of it. And she said, Buddy, I'm going to pray that when we get older, God's going to open the door for us to come to the Northwest. Well, time went on. We took the company public. Now I am the chief operating officer. From Steve-O Bonner, chief operating officer, and I'm sitting in the room with the big boys from Port Boys and Napa Auto Parts, and the shareholders, when they call them for the conference calls, they were talking to Buddy, and I'm telling them what's going on, and I asked them why they spoke to me, and they said, well, we know that you don't lie, and that's all I've got. Well, we took it out, we went public, and when we went public, I had the opportunity to buy shares at $1 a copy. And when they told me that, I'm like, how many can I buy? And they said 100,000. And I'm like, okay, I'll take 100,000. I didn't even think anything about it. They said, you're going to have to hop the house. And I'm like, okay. I didn't think anything about that until I'm on my way home, and I thought, uh-oh. I gotta go tell my wife that I hopped her house for $100,000 without even talking to her. And that was not a comfortable thought. And when I walked in, I told her all up front. I said, honey, this is what I did. And she was whole response was, what? And I said, Mama, that's it. And I said, I'm not worried about it. We're gonna make it. And she said, Buddy, we're gonna pray. And I said, yes, ma'am. Well, story went on. And about 6 months later, we opened a 5-7/8 on Mazda. So that made we had the money. Well, I went to $10 a share, and I called my HR guy, PR guy, whatever you want to call him, and I said, Ben, I want to sell some shares. And he said, Buddy, I don't know if you can sell shares. I said, I didn't ask you that. I said, I want to sell some shares. And he laughed and said, okay, I'll do what I can. He said, how many you want to sell? I want to sell 50,000. And a little bit later, that was about 9:30 in the morning, about 11 o'clock, I got a page for I needed to go to the owner's office. He come back to work by then, but I went to the owner's office, and there was the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, and they were in there and they were angry. How dare you sell your shares without checking with us? And I'm like, do what? I've got to check with you to sell my shares. But you know, when it comes to the SEC, those shares are marked, and you can't sell them. And this is SEC has done it. And I said, look, fellas, here's the deal. I'm responsible. Something wrong, I'll take the heat. You guys can go back and do about your business. Well, about that time, the receptionist said, Buddy, I got a call for you. You better take it to our SEC attorney. And I said, cool, put him on the phone. I got him on the phone. And I thought, oh, hang on a minute. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. I got the CEO and the CFO on the room with me, and they're angry with me. And he said, what are they angry about? And I said, because I sold my shares without asking them. And he said, who are you? I said, you had to ask him. And I said, they did. And he said, well, let me tell you, the big problem you have right now is telling me what you want to do with $500,000 because your show is just sold. And I said, they told me they can't because a mark was on them. He said, Buddy, don't question it. The mark has been lifted. I don't know how it happened, but your shares have been sold. And he said, so tell me how you want to do it. I said, come my wife. And that okay because she would be on that. And so that took care of that. He called me back a couple of days later and he said, I have no understanding, but he said, I wanted to let you know, don't try to sell any more socks because the mark had been placed back on it. So about that time later on, we got a job offer to move to Portland again. And my wife said, well, God answered my prayers. This was like 30 years later. And so I was given notice and we moved to Portland. Long story short, March of that year, I got a letter, one of those, you got to sign for it, letter. And one means
Yeah.
God knows. And it was from the Old Young Medicine Center in Glenwood, Texas. And I'm like, I don't know anybody there. And then it dawned on me, I know people in Texas, and I got a good reputation back there, and this could be anybody. Well, I went to the post office, signed for it, and it was from my brother. And I am shaking like a leaf. People, I knew everybody in the post office, and people in there gathering place for it. And this lady said, I started ripping it open, and this lady said, Buddy, you're shaking like a leaf. And I said, I probably got bad news here, folks, so hang on and watch me go. And she said, Buddy, you got something. She picked it up. It was a picture of my brother, his wife, their two children, and my mother. She was still alive for 37
What?
years, lived without knowing that each other was alive. And here we are. I got this letter, and the first line in it was my brother was a doctor, and the first line in it was, "Oh, I can't divulge how I got your address, but I do believe it was arranged by God." And he went through and told me that my stepdad, who was the problem at the time whenever I was younger, had passed away. My little brother had passed away, but my mama was still alive. And so I'm like, now what do I do? I told my wife when she came home from that work that day, and she started crying and dancing and shouting hallelujah. So I wrote my brother back and told him, I said, "Hell, I didn't write you. You wrote me if you want to talk on the names and back. Work on the names and right." And it was a little stilted when we started talking because of 37 years, there was some a little hard feelings. And he said, Buddy, all of a sudden he's shouting, I got nieces, I got nephews, I got ball. And I'm like, yeah, me too. And he said, Buddy, I'm going to go see Mama on Sunday, and I'm going to tell her we found you. And he said, I said, well, if she doesn't want to talk to me, I totally understand. But I'm happy because she's had a good life, and you are doing well, and she's got grandkids, and I'm good if she's good. I said, but if she doesn't want to talk to me, Sunday now, Sunday afternoon after church, the phone rings just like promised, and my brother's on the line, and he said, Buddy, got somebody that wants to talk to you. And I get on the phone, and she said, is this Buddy my son? And I said, yes, ma'am. And the first words were, son, I love you so much. And I'm like, Mom, I love you. And I'm sitting there about to cry. And she said, was it drugs? And I said, I just want goofy and had a lot to live. And I said, the rumors. And she said, I don't care about that. I love you. And I said, no, here's the deal. We're going to get you all plane tickets. We're going to fly you up to Portland, and we're going to spend some time together. And she said in her little voice, no, son, I don't think. I said, Mama, I don't think you understood. Boy, don't you argue with your mother. Sir, I was 6 years old again. Yes, Mama. And we had a great conversation. No arrangements for my wife and I had fought out. And so we went back. My cousin, her husband was a head of entomology at Texas A&M. So we flew into Austin, went and visited with them. And they had done a tree, one of those, family drawing, family trees. And they brought me up to date on everything that had been going on for the last 37 years. I went to see my brother and his wife, and when my wife went away, we got to meet them. And then we drove to my hometown of Aldereta to meet my mom. And we got there, and there she was standing on the back step. And when I left home, she was about 5'2". And when we got there, she was full of them from scoliosis and other things. But she was standing in there just staring at me. And I was cold off mama, and everybody got cameras and all. And so I started up there, and sir, she was holding on up on, and all of a sudden, my son, my mama. And we stuck out arms for a hug off. So she hung off and smacked me. And she said, boy, I've been waiting for you for this. I've been wrong. And we hugged, we fought, we had 4 days with her, and boy, it was just a wonderful time. She took us to church with her, and it was just glorious time. But my brother had told me that my mom had told everybody she didn't have any reason to live. And I'm thinking, I don't want to go into a pity party. I love my mommy, but I don't want to start something that I'm going to take my family into. If she don't, and I said, Jim, how does that make you feel that mom says she doesn't have no reason to live? He said, oh, we just honor it. I said, well, I won't tell her until you leave. And after we left, I said, Mom, I understand you got no reason for living. And she said, oh, buddy, my husband's gone and my son died. And I'm like, Mom, I got to tell you something. I'm just honest, straightforward. And I said, I'm the son that you raised to be honest and straightforward. And I said, here's the deal. I want you to go to have a great time with my wife and you. And you guys have already been beating me up and have abusing me and having a great time at my expense. So we want to go ahead and have a great time. But when they leave, we won't be coming involved because I don't want to get involved in your pity party. And I said, we love you, but you have reason to live, Mom. And I don't understand it. And before she left, she coming in, well, we were in the bedroom where we were sleeping in, and her loudest voice saying, okay, this is the day. Yeah, the great day, waking us up and just having a good time. And when we left, my brother said, did you tell Mom? And I said, sure did. I ain't having nothing. And he said, my God, she's so happy. And I'm like, well, the truth will set you free, Jen. Well, to make a long story short, we had great 4 years, and she had fallen and was in hospital, probably one next to hospice. And I called her one day, and she said, Buddy, I'm tired. And I'm like, Mom, you want to go home? She said, yes. And I said, Mom, I don't know anybody that's closer to Jesus than you. And if you're ready to go home, let go and let God. And she said, you're not going to get no, Mama. You go home. You fought the good fight. Well, a little bit later, my brother called me and said, how about you tell Mom that she can die? Well, the next Friday, I get a call. Jim said, Buddy, your mom's in the hospice. And I called and I said, I'm going to call her. So I called him. The lady said, Buddy, your mom is not here. She said she's here, but she doesn't know what's going on. She's not eating, and she doesn't know anybody. I said, it's okay. Put the phone up to her. And so they put it up, and I said, hello, Mama. Who is this? And I said, it's Buddy, your son. I don't know you, but I sure like your voice. She said, but I've got to go. They've got a popsicle for me. And I'm like, okay. I'm thinking it's all right. Then next Friday, I called her, and they said, Buddy, she is definitely gone. She's not diagnosed either popsicle that we can't keep her alive. And I said, that's okay. Put the phone up to her ear, and I'm going to tell her that I love her. Put the phone up to her ear and told her, said, Mom, I love you. So what I'm going to tell you is straight truth. I got it in my book, so it's in writing. I said, Mom, I love you. She said, boy, let me tell you something. You gave me a great time. You gave me a beautiful daughter-in-law, 3 beautiful grandkids, 5 beautiful great-grandkids, and 4 great-grandkids, 5 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandkids. And she said, if you mistreat them, I'll come back and haunt you. And I said, you know what's going on? She said, Buddy, I got to get off of here. They want to keep me alive, and I'm ready to go see Jesus. I hung up that day. Sunday morning, I got the call, and we closed the old church because she was home. So that's why the grace to get and all that played into my life on that.
Oh, yeah, that's even more of a beautiful testimony. I'm sure your book is full of all the rest of the details. Let's go ahead and talk more about your book. What led to you finally to write it and publish it as your memoir? Like, what brought you to that point in your life?
Well, that's when my wife and the great man told me it's got to be written. And I'm not letting know that that was in February and started writing it. And by September, I had 300 and something pages. And it was in English. I don't know how it happened. I just did it. And the thing the soul, the most part sad because I had the way I am helped me to get people that made my way through. I didn't know anything about publishing or marketing or anything. And he guided me all the way. And people came into my life that I didn't know, and they didn't stay long, but they helped me to get there. Well, all of a sudden, I've got a book, I got a manuscript, and I called publishing company. And one of them that really broke my heart was the one that publishes Bible, is Thomas Sonner. And so they were the worst. $10,000 they wanted in 6 months.
Oh,
And I'm not going I can't wait that long. We got to get this done. The most part, again, is the truth. I got a phone call from a guy just outside of Olympia, Washington, named Mark Greenwald. And he said, "Buddy, I got a message here that you need to help you self-publish your book. And I think I can help you." And I said, "Well, this is the story." And he said, "Buddy, I'm going to be honest. I'm Jewish. I don't believe what you're believing." And he said, "Maybe you'd be better to go with somebody that has the same beliefs as you do and be able to go to the same crowd to solve it." And I just knew. And I said, "Mark, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in making money?" He said, "I'm Jewish, ain't I?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He said, "You don't want to make money." I said, "Then you're the guy for me." Well, yeah. Between one and the editor, it cost me $3,100, and it was done in 30 days. When
oh,
this guy, this Mark Greenwald, he's one to be believed, but he saw miracles, and he finally knew it. Well, when he told me, "I will never do the marketing. I'm not a marketing guy." And 3 days before we needed to start marketing it, he sent us a marketing plan. When Jamie called him and said, "Mark, you told us you wouldn't market it." He said, "Why did you change your mind?" He said, "I like Buddy." So I know that he liked what he saw in us. He saw the Jesus, and he wanted to be a part of it. So we got it together. We launched on January 6th. This really comes. On January 13th of that, he called me and said, "Don't get excited that your book is #1 on Amazon in the men's inspirational category." And I'm like, "I'm not excited. You told us not to expect anything." And I said, "But that is up good." And he said, "That's cool." The next fall, he called me and he said, "Buddy," he said, "don't get excited that your book is still #1 and it's climbing other categories." And I'm like, "Can I get excited a little bit?" I said, "Mark, let me ask you a question. How long is it going to be before I can start with Barnes and Noble?" He said, "Buddy, you got to sell some books." He said, you go to brokers. It's going to cost you $500 to go through Sparks." And he said, "This is just not going to happen. Enjoy what you have." And I'm like, "Good for us." Next Tuesday morning, I got a cup of coffee, came to my computer, timed on my book just to see what it looked like. And there was my opening mail on Barnes and Noble. We were online at Barnes and Noble the following Tuesday. Then it's out there.
wow.
It's on Walmart, Walgreens. It's on all of it. Google Books, eBay, and all that stuff. And we're not setting the world on fire on booksellers, but God has just honored every which way. And the great lion is a hoot. He is a wonderful personal
Yeah.
God and has told us all along, this big book is going to sprout wings. How do I know? Because I've got wings. He told us it's going to snowball. How do I know that? Because I am the snowball. And it's just been that kind of a thing. And that's where we are today. And when we get ready to end it, I got one to tell you. So I hope that answers the question about how we went with our book and what we're doing. And is that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. God literally made it happen for you. Now, was there anything difficult about putting your story down on paper?
God came through it. The only thing that was difficult was we had a little janitorial company that we had started from zero, and it was making about 30,000 a month. And I had to spend a lot of time making sure that that was operating out. And besides that, we had gone through this financial thing. And I got it in my book, we had to file bankruptcy. And that was difficult because nobody knew. And I got to tell you, man, I needed to find the bankruptcy attorney. My wife had been telling me, we're not going to file bankruptcy. And I'm like, okay, when I wound up sleeping in the street. She said, we're not going to file. God will make a way. Well, one Saturday morning, she came in with all her wisdom and said, well, I think you need to file bankruptcy. And I'm like, oh, woman of wisdom, you know that. She said, call a bankruptcy attorney. Well, Saturday morning, the bankruptcy attorney. And so, okay, I started calling, and I got a couple of three of them. No good, nobody answered. And I got a hold of this guy, and he said, hello. And I'm like, I'm looking for a bankruptcy attorney. What do you want? A bankruptcy attorney. He said, me. I said, I need to file bankruptcy. He said, am I making you know? I'm not kind of cleaning that up because that's not what he said. So he said, am I making you know? I said, yes, sir. Listen, I've got a client for the next 2 years. I'm going to send you a contract. And he gave me a pleasure that was wonderful. And it just, so we done what? Well, now was tongues and interpretation. And God said, you chose law, my son. And I'm like, I didn't choose anything, God. You got enough for. Also, I turned out to be the number one bankruptcy attorney in Southern California. He also teaches law in colleges, and he had another company up in Sacramento that did his work. And they had a lady there, and I'm giving them in the Patricia's yours because she was a Christian. My wife was having problems, a little bit of a hard time during that time. And she was so sweet, don't worry about it, James. I've got you, and we're on the wild path into the airport. The day that it came for us to go to bankruptcy court, our wife was a nervous wreck. But by the time that we got there and everything, we got to other people, and this lady was taking care of them. They were doing this. But she got us, the bankruptcy judge got us on the phone and said, we told her the story. And she asked us a question, and she said, I think that's all I got. And she asked us one question we didn't know the answer to. And I turned, I didn't know was on the phone, and she answered that. And the lady said, I think that's all we got. And she said, um, it's done. We're done. She said, yeah, nobody to want to cause problems. You'll figure will be done and finished in December. And it was fun because that quickly, but that's God. And I was finishing that up, so there was a lot of things that were going on outside of the book, but it was kind of a relief to get to work on the book while all this was going on. But God made a way, and so no, it was a beautiful experience for my wife too, because she got to tell me how lots of it.
Yeah. Now, what do you hope readers walk away with after reading The Great I Am is the Golden Strand?
You know, when I wrote the book, the first line in the book was, I am not in this book to encourage people. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to try to get anybody to come with what I believe because that's antithetical to what I believe. I believe that in the Bible it says everybody has to work out their own salvation with fear and trembling. And everybody has to make a choice of what they believe. All I'm doing is telling you what God has done for me. And the Bible says that He's no respecter of persons. What He did for me, He'll do for anybody. I don't know how He's going to do it, but when I look at it, I know that I had one of the stories in my book is about a guy that was ready to commit suicide and on a taxi ride. If I could tell that story, it won't take long had to go to California for a kiss for Christmas. We just bought a brand new car. We were living in Washington, and we get down below there, and the steering belt busted. Brand new car. And here we are stuck in Low Dog Wind on Christmas Eve. And there is nobody open nothing. And I had this random idea that I'd get a taxi and would tell you I'd have the taxi take me back to Sacramento Airport because it wasn't up far and there wasn't money. And I could get a wanted car and I'll pick my wife up and we'd go see our grandkids. Well, there were no taxis open. And I saw a bulletin board that had a card on it that said taxi in handwriting. And they told me before I called it, and when the guy answered the phone, I was sorry because, what do you want? And I said, I need a taxi. Are you a taxi? You got money? Yes, sir. Are you a taxi? Yeah, I'm a taxi. I wouldn't be talking to you. I'll be there in a little bit. I got a hold of my wife and I said, sweetheart, you better play because there's something going on. And when I walked when the car pulled up out front, there's one of these old black and white checker cabs. And on the side in pink writing, it's got taxi handwriting. And when I got in the car, oh, get out fight. This guy had been drinking. He whooped and his bloodshot eyes. And I said, Lord, if I don't get there, just pull me on now. And so we got on Highway 99 and we settled out in this car with that far. It was up, and he was sitting over there coaching it. And I'm sitting over there trolling, and we got on 99 and it's really bad. He said, I for one, he said, I just remember those Bible thumpers. And I'm like, dude, what? He said, well, I don't believe it. And he said, don't start thumping the Bible with me. I'm in no need for that. And I said, do me a favor, Cody. You get this car to the airport and we never talk again. And so we left. So we're going. First thing he said, okay, tell me the story. I'm like, you don't want to hear it. I had a bunch of stories, but the one that I chose that God gave me was the one about my mama. And I told him the whole story and how that I hadn't seen her and God put us back together. So I looked over there, tears rolling down this guy's face. And we got to the airport, and at the Sacramento Airport, you get off I-5 and go down a little south road to get to the airport. He pulled over there and stopped. And I'm like, uh-oh, what's this? He said, sir, he said, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I said, just give me the rental car, my friend. So we get down to the rental area. He gets out of the car. I get out of the car. He comes around. He gives me a big hug. I'm getting ready to give him the money. And I think getting $150 there. I just wanted to get there. And I started pointing it out. And he said, I got the $80. He said, that's enough. And I said, but he said, so, and tears were really rolling now. He said, I got to tell you something. I hadn't seen my mother in 6 months. And he said, when you told me the story about your mama, he said, it broke my heart. And he said, I'm going to see my mama today. I'm going to go see her. And he said, so over underneath that seat is a pistol, and it's loaded. And he said, before you called, I was sitting in my bed with that pistol. And he said, I was getting ready to pull the trigger when the phone rang. And he said, you saved my life. Will you take that pistol? No, but I'll take the ammunition and everything because I'm going to win the car and I want nothing to see everything. I said, but I will do whatever. And I said, but you got to make me a promise here before. He said, well, keep close to me. And right there at that place, we had a prayer meeting. And we walked, and I went to pick my wife up, and we got home. But that story, I still think about that guy, and I tried to play, but he got to see his mamas. That's the kind of people I'm looking for. Anybody and everybody, and trying reality in this day and age. Everybody needs an encouragement. Everybody needs an uplift. There's people that are willing to tell you how much they love you and then stab you in the back. And they don't get that from God.
That's amazing. Now, if someone is listening right now and feels stuck or without hope, what is one step they can take today?
The first thing you got to do is before anything else, you got to find the honest yourself. You got to get on your knees, and I'm not telling you to go to Jesus. I'm telling you to find out who you are and what the deal is, because if the hardest person to be honest with is yourself. And if you can't be honest with yourself, you got serious problems. But if you can be honest with yourself, Jesus is waiting on you. There is a love. Everybody thinks God is this austere character that's looking to send somebody to hell that is not a loving God. And he is, you gotta do it his way or the highway. And he loves you so much. The first time that I heard his love song, it melted me. And so whoever this is that we're talking to, I'm praying for you because it's a hard battle. To get on your knees and tell yourself, I got somebody good in here. And I got a Jesus that's waiting on me. And he's sitting on the portal. He's waiting and watching, calling, oh son, come home. Come home like you are, because that's who Jesus loves. And all you gotta do is tell him, hey, I'm a sinner. Forgive me. I repent. I'm going to turn the other way. And he will walk with you and talk with you. And he said, I am not better than I'll never leave you nor forsake you. And that's not for me. It's for everybody. Male, female,
Yeah.
and I can wake lost sinner from all you can please. And he did that for me. And obedience. If you're not obedient, it's not going to turn on. It's not going to turn on a switch on a light if you don't have faith that's going to turn the light on. You got to have faith in everything. And it's time to have
Yeah.
faith in God because he is the one true.
Yes. Now, what does hope mean to you now compared to what it meant earlier in your life?
I'm going to tell you, I have a problem with that word hope because it's the way it's used in the world today. It's a weak word. I got hope that's going to happen. But in God's world, that is coincides with faith. Because God said, and Jesus said you have hope. So in God's world, hope and faith and obedience to me are like the three strands. Because obedience and faith line right up. Because if you're not going to be obedient, you're going to have faith. That's a sense of playing the game. Now, but you're dealing, let me explain that you're dealing with life and death. It's not a game. And just like that fellow in the taxi, he was up for. And when you do that, they don't want to talk about hell, but it's mentioned in the Bible in heaven. And God is not waiting to send you to hell. God is waiting to tell you, son, come home, I'm waiting on you. And that's the end of it right there.
Yes, that's powerful. Now, if you could go back and speak to a younger version of yourself, what would you say?
This is the one I'm hoping you won't get past me because I gotta be honest. I'll take a look at me and say, boy, you ain't full. You better get because you ain't got a chance. You're not the bad dude that you think you are. You're gonna get whooped. You're gonna wind up in trouble. And you've had a good life. You've got a mama that loves you. You've got people that love you, and you're walking away from them into a world that you know nothing about. And Satan is there, and he's real. He's just as real as God is. And he has got no power, but you're giving him your life. And if you don't do this, don't come running home to mama because Jesus is your only answer. That may not be very politicalized. That may not sound very compassionate. And the tough love thing would work with me. Because if you don't have that kind of love, you don't have the backbone to stand up and say, God, I need you. Jesus, I need you. But when you say, Jesus, I need you, oh, you got a fool forever.
Wow, I think that's good. I would probably say something similar to my younger self. Now, where can our listeners find your book and connect with you?
Okay, you can go on my website, and that's Buddy Mercer, author. No, it's BuddyMercer.com. Oh, BuddyMercer.com. I got my wife over here telling me the good things. That's BuddyMercer.com. But anyhow, so it's BuddyMercer.com website, and Buddy Mercer 43 is for Instagram on Facebook and Facebook. Amazon, all those places I told you, our book is online. And Sarah, I want to give them. I am very much in this to win it, and I'll give them my email if you think that's acceptable, and I will
You
answer
can share your
email.
email. I'm gonna put all of your information in our show notes so everybody can be able to follow you on your social medias and check out your website. Yes, because that's the whole point, the Great Commission is to help others, to help the lost.